today. We're continuing, getting near the end of our series called Conversations in Jesus, working our way through the book of Matthew, seeing different major conversations that Jesus had with small groups or individuals. As we're pulling into this kind of last section here, it's a lot of conversations between Jesus and the disciples, which is where we find ourselves today. In particular, Jesus is in this Passion Week in the area in and around Jerusalem, and he's been teaching. He's been welcomed into the community with this triumphal entry where they're crying, Hosanna, Hosanna. The Pharisees and Sadducees and all these other groups have been trying to trap Jesus and ask him all these questions to try and either trick him or get him to incriminate himself. And now we arrive at this moment where Jesus is going to go and he's going to get away with his disciples. And just like last week where Jesus kind of spoke to the Pharisees and the scribes directly, this week Jesus is going to speak to his disciples and give them some specific instruction. Now, as a preacher, there's a lot of things I want to be and a lot of things I don't want to be, and some that it's fine if you call me that. And so there's been a couple times that I've tried to engage you all with some sort of object illustration, and then I'm called a prop preacher by my co-pastors mostly. It's not really you guys. It's mostly Rob and Troy, if we're honest. So I get picked on. But there's one thing I've never wanted to be, and that's a map preacher. But heaven help me, I think we need a map for this passage, okay? So here's the map. And it's not that I don't like maps. I just feel like sometimes it's like people are just trying to make sure, they did a little work and Googled once, which I did. And so I'm going to read you. This is Matthew 24, verses 1 and 2, and that'll help us understand our map here in just a moment. It says this. As Jesus left and was going out of the temple, his disciples came up and called his attention to its buildings. He replied to them, "Do you see all these things? Truly I tell you, not one stone will be left here on another that will not be thrown down." Now, this is why we need the map, because we need to see the journey that Jesus is taking and kind of how it places the disciples to understand and to see what he's talking about here. So you can see Jesus and the disciples start off at the Temple Mount. This is like modern. This is a real place, guys. So this is a modern Google walking map, okay? Pretty impressive. These things are still there. And the Mount of Olives is a real place where they were heading, we'll see here in just a moment. But what I want you to see is that little kind of statement on the upper corner there of elevation gain. Because what I think is really cool to think about is as Jesus is walking from the Temple Mount up to the Mount of Olives, they are continually gaining elevation, and therefore they are gaining this perspective on this 20 to 40 minute walk. Yeah, John's so excited because John's like, "I'll be there next week." We know. We don't care. Man. Subscribe to John's Substack to see his travel journeys. He would love it. So they are walking away, and in the distance, we keep seeing perspective grow as they see the kind of the grandeur that was the temple and the buildings surrounding it. And Jesus, with all this in view, makes this statement. He says, "Do you see all of those buildings? I tell you the truth, not one stone is going to be left on the other one." Now, that's probably terrifying if you're the disciples, right? Like imagine you and I are out and we head out to Belknap Lookout and we're at Lookout Park and I'm like, "You see that city? Going to be gone next week." You would call the authorities, right? You'd be like, we gotta let somebody know about something Brad just said. Like, I don't think he can do it, but he's really into AI and he might have cracked it. I don't know what we're gonna do here, So I think this is probably a little bit of a scary comment that Jesus made, in particular because the disciples, they're starting to get it, right? Like they see Jesus' power, they've seen the actions and the way that his words play out. Couple this with this thought of Jesus as some sort of a zealous overthrower. The Messiah was going to come in this moment to right the things of the world. And we get kind of this tension that exists in the disciples. And the other reason I think the maps is important, because it seems like he says this along the way, like they're climbing the hill, and then they just have to kind of keep walking and deal with it, right? They're like kind of trailing behind Jesus, like, "Did you hear what he said back there? Like, is he good? Does he know about Judas?" I don't know what's going on in their minds. It says this now, verse 3. While he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, so we've arrived at the end of our journey here, so the disciples approached him privately. So they've continued this journey up the hill, and now we're at this resting place on the top of the mountain. Remember, mountains, resting places, the desolate places, these are where we see Jesus go so often in Scripture, that he might seek out the empowering of the Holy Spirit, that he might pray or meet with his people to receive strength. That's what's going to happen a lot in these next few weeks of sermons. We'll see Jesus in the garden, out in the wilderness, praying, trying to reckon with the death that he knows awaits him soon. And so the disciples, I think when he says here, comes up to him privately, like we're kind of in an alone situation now, and I picture this as them almost kind of sneaking up to him. And here's the words that they say. They say this. And they said, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what is the sign of your coming and the end of the end of the age?" The disciples ask the most logical question ever, right? I mean, I think this is like a rare W. Often the disciples ask questions and you're like, why is that what you would ask? But Jesus says, hey, the entirety of Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. The temple, the pride and joy, the most impressive building that you've ever seen, cladded with gold, with thick curtains that were unable even to be lifted without a team of people. This massive structure, the pride of a nation. Jesus predicts its downfall, its destruction. And so they say, when's it going to happen? I got to be honest with you, like sermons around these topics, they just feel scary, right? It's not like I'm scared of the topic of like the things of the end times or kind of more apocalyptic language that we'll see here. I think it's just that like uncertainty makes all of us uncomfortable, and I think it makes me in particular uncomfortable. I don't like when I don't know like what the next move is or kind of what things are heading towards or when they're going to hit their culmination. And so like sermons like this, I think I feel a lot of what the disciples feel, right? I feel like what I want to know from God as we work through this is when and what. What is it going to look like? When is it going to happen? How do I prepare for it? And at the end of the day, I'm probably asking like, how do I win the end times, right? Like, how do I come out better than other folks? That'll be my book. Optimize Your End Times with Pastor Brad. I will not be writing a book, clearly. We're doing great today. So, I think the thing is, sermons like this prompt something that's really natural. They make us want to ask when and how. And that's what the disciples' question is. And this question is particularly hard as we look at this passage, both in terms of how Jesus will answer the disciples here in just a moment, and what he's telling you and I about the overall future of the world as we know it. Because Jesus is going to answer this in a way that's really strange for our very linear, one-moment clarity kind of way. That thinks, hey, you write about a thing, you're clear about the thing, you say when the thing is coming, you support it, 3 points, intro, all that stuff, right? College writing 101. That's not how they wrote in this time. In particular, that's not how prophecy was written. Prophecy is often written in a way where we see what we call either multiple or progressive fulfillment, where we see things that have not necessarily double meaning, but have progressive understandings to the way that those things will be fulfilled. And so some of the things that Jesus is going to say here are things that we're going to see have happened already. The temple was, in fact, destroyed. There was a major leader who came in who many think looked like this person who think people will call the abomination in a moment. And then there are parts of this that we're like, well, that hasn't happened yet. Because there are parts of it that just seem too grand and too difficult to understand. We can't picture them, and yet it seems like Jesus is saying to the disciples, these are happening now. And so this passage is going to bring for us a little bit of kind of a small scale picture of what the greater judgment that is to come is going to be. We're going to see how this plays out in the disciples' time, and then how Jesus predicts here that will grow into something that we can't exactly know or understand or define. Parts of this section are very difficult. This destruction of the temple that becomes this preview or this signpost, small-scale picture of what's going to come, and the way that Jesus describes the events of the future. When one commentator, PhD named Mounts, a real PhD, not a demon, we covered this last week, he calls this chapter notably difficult, which I just wish they would be a little bit more genuine and just write, like, I don't know what it means, you figure it out, instead of just using academic speak. But good for him, right? It's notably difficult. You'll see why in just a moment. Here's Jesus' reply to their question of when is this going to happen? Verse 4-8. It says, Jesus replied to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and they will deceive many. You're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not alarmed, because these things must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these events are the beginning of the labor pains. Jesus gives them an answer, surely, but not one that particularly honors the question that they asked. He says, be careful about trying to predict my return based on what you see. And then he gives them some warnings. He says, I want you to look out for the deceivers that are going to come. Jesus warns the disciples that in this coming age, and because of the predictions that are going to be made about Jesus, and because of how Jesus is going to change the world, he says, you need to look out, because there are going to be many who come and say, I'm the Messiah, I'm returning, I'm the returning Christ. The moment is now. He says there are going to be people who come and try and deceive you. He says, hey, the world is going to often look like it's ending. Amen? Can we stop? Are we done? He says, you're going to hear about wars, and you're going to hear about rumors of wars. I think this is interesting to think about. Why is he telling them this? Like, why would this be unique to them? Well, it's because, like, they didn't have 24/7 news, right? So like you were only really knowing what was happening in your immediate context or your people or your nation. What Jesus says to them is, hey, as things move on, as the future moves forward, as we get closer and closer to the time when I return, you're going to hear about wars. There's going to be more conflict than you knew. What I think Jesus is saying to them is, hey, the scope of the world is going to grow for you. You're going to begin to understand how big this thing is, that it's not just your little world and what's happening in it. You're going to see that the turmoil, the sin that is destroying your life is going to begin to tear pieces of the world apart. And he tells them this, he says, but when this happens, he says, don't be alarmed. What Jesus is saying is hearing about wars and rumors of wars. People who would come with religious manipulation, even to the extent that they would declare that they were the Messiah. He says none of these tense indications that the world might be starting to end are telling you that the moment is now. He says these are just the start. Worse still, he says there will be earthquakes. He says entire nations and kingdoms will begin warring against one another. What Jesus, I think, is telling them here is you're going to see conflict and wars like you haven't seen since Rome came into power. Remember, one of Rome's claims to fame was that they had instituted the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace, which was held with an iron fist as any uprisings were immediately struck down. This led to a period of relative peace, even though that peace was being brought about by some really unpeaceful and difficult things on the back end. Jesus says here, you're going to see a different kind of war in the future. This is not going to be a family skirmishing against a family. This isn't going to be a small tribe versus a small tribe. He says you're going to see entire nations and kingdoms rise up against one another. The very earth will shake. And what does Jesus say? He says, but all these events, they're just the start of the labor pains. You might know we have 4 kids. Our oldest is going to turn 16 this summer, which is amazing to me that we've gotten to have her for so long. Lucy, her name is, her arrival was crazy to us because like we thought we were pretty ready, right? Sarah and I are both oldest children, so we know how to do everything. We've been taking care of everything for as long as we remember. And now we were going to birth an oldest child and gift the world one of those. There is nothing like the oldest child of 2 oldest children. Let me tell you that right now. They know what they're doing, and they know that they know what they're doing, and they will let you know. But because of this, I think like we've been through all the classes, we knew, and like we'd watched all the shows, and we knew like how labor worked, right? Like we knew it wasn't TV and it wasn't instantaneous. But you know, as they're telling you about labor, they're like, well, hey, one of the things you can do is you time the contractions, right? And if the contractions are this far apart, that's how you know you're getting ready and you need to pay more attention. Well, what no one told us is that someone could have contractions 4 minutes apart for almost 48 hours, and that maybe you don't have to time every single one of them. And so we stayed up, man. I was like, we can't stop this. And if the contractions slowed down because she calmed down, we're like, stop what you're doing and wake back up. We got to get Lucy out now, right? We had no idea. It was such a long process, right? And if we would have known, we would have behaved way differently, right? We tell people often, like, hey, when your labor is starting, go to bed, okay? Just go to bed. You've got some time. As long as you're feeling okay, just rest and take your time as you work through this pain. Jesus says the wars that are going to come about, the things that they're going to see, it's just like the start of labor. It's painful, but there's a long thing to endure before the culmination of this event. Jesus wants to help them a little bit know what this period might look like for them in particular, this immediate period of struggle and tribulation. And he picks it up here in verse 9, saying this. It says, then they will hand you over to be persecuted, and they will kill you. And you will be hated by all nations because of my name. Then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. Many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. Because lawlessness will multiply and the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. This is the good news of the kingdom that will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing there in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. A man on the housetop must not come down to get the things out of the house, and a man in the field must not go back to get his coat. Woe to the pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. Pray that your escape may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for at that time there will be great distress, the kind that hasn't taken place from the beginning of the world until now, and never will again. Unless those days were cut short, no one would be saved. But those days will be cut short because of the elect. What's going to happen? They may have asked Jesus. He says persecution is what's coming. The labor pains will begin, he warns his disciples, with this destruction of the temple, and along with this will enter an era in which believers will be hated, persecuted, and blamed for many of the ills with what were going on in the downfall of the Roman Empire. Christians became both a scapegoat as well as a punching bag for emperors like Nero and others who would come after this time and who would take all of their downfall and poor leadership and blame it on many different religions, but focusing in often on Christians in these moments as the religion grew. Jesus warns them that the persecution that's coming, and I think this points both to what they're going to experience soon in the destruction of the temple and Israel ultimately being put under great distress from these wars. I think he's also, though, pointing to the ultimate end, which he'll speak more in just a moment of. Again, when? What's happening? How? Jesus continues to try and explain after this word picture from the book of Daniel. He picks it up in 23. So if anyone tells you then, see, here's the Messiah over here, don't believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Take note, I've told you in advance. So if they tell you, seize in the wilderness, don't go out. Or if they say, seize in the storerooms, don't believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the carcass is, there the vultures will gather. Now, it's really normal to want to see Jesus come back, right? This is a normal emotion. It's something that we talk about within the Christian faith, is that we want Jesus to return. But what's really risky is that our desire for the return of Christ can come into an obsession with understanding and pretending that we can perfectly know how and when Jesus will return. When we become more fixated on the timing and the means of the return of Christ, trying to predict it or spot it, we can also often become really prideful. And in that pride, risk believing lies. This is what Jesus warns the disciples of. He says, hey, there are going to be people in this period who are going to try and give you things to cling to in your suffering. As the world starts to look like a place that cannot meet your comforts anymore, others are going to say, hey, I have a window into where the Messiah is. I can pull you over here. I can show you him. I can give you this special insight. Jesus warns them, not only is this false teaching, it is often going to be used as a trap for them. Literally to perhaps arrest or torture or just take advantage of. Jesus warns that when we begin to look specifically for the return of the Messiah instead of focusing on what he has asked us to focus on, that we are at risk of being deceived and pulled into wayward thoughts, which we'll see throughout the entire New Testament, right? Conversations, false teaching, and groups of believers forming around what they think about when Jesus is coming back, if Jesus is coming back, how he's coming back, that cause division and ultimately distraction from the mission that God has called us to. Verse 29. Jesus says, immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not shed its light. So the stars will fall from the sky and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He'll send out his angels with a loud trumpet, and they will gather the elect from the four winds and each ends of the sky to the other. And Jesus gives us illustrations. He says, learn the lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its branches become tender, it sprouts leaves, and you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, recognize that he is near, at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation certainly will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Jesus says, the way that you will know that this is happening is that you will see it happening. Thanks, Jesus. Like, that's kind of his answer. I think it's probably a pretty dissatisfying answer for them initially. Now, this section is confusing, right? Because some of these predictions seem pretty unmistakable, right? The sun will be darkened. The moon will not shed its light. Stars will fall from the sky. These don't seem like things that have happened yet. And yet, what he says here is that this generation won't pass away until all these things have taken place. This is one of these important places where we see this multiple or progressive fulfillment take place. Certainly, many of them would see the destruction of the temple in their era. Many of the original readers of this text would experience this tribulation that Jesus said was coming and describes as so bad that if it wasn't restrained, that the entire people of the Jewish race might be wiped out. This is what he says, like, if I were not to stop it, there might not be any of you left. Instead, what Jesus is doing here is both warning them of the age that is to come, that they might prepare themselves for the suffering, but also that he might point all of us to the reality that this world and the existence of it is not the future, that it's going to change. Jesus says you will know it when you see it, but it's not going to be happening until then. Has this already happened then? What of this has already happened? Certainly we know that Jesus is not wrong. Jesus is saying that the judgment on the temple will fall soon. He's protecting that will happen within a generation, and in fact it did. But in this, what he's also doing is teaching every generation after this how to live knowing that they are in the final days until the Son of Man comes in glory. Now, the Christian faith has a large element in it of patience and delay in our final relief from the pain of this world. Jesus tells his disciples in this period of waiting, in this period of confusion where you don't know exactly what's happening or when it's going to happen, what is Jesus' encouragement to them in this passage? Because if you're honest, if you read this section, which I'll tell you, in my notes is labeled gospel, you're like, that's the wrong title, right? Because not a lot of gospel presentations end with comments about the vultures, which is not usually in the wordless book. That's a joke for like 3 of you. No, what Jesus says here, read it again, is important. Verse 29. Just immediately after the rest of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon won't shed its light, the stars will fall from the sky. And then 30, it says, then the Son of Man will appear in the sky. The people of earth will mourn, and they will see the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds. He'll send out his angels with a loud trumpet, and what will they do? They will gather the elect from the four winds and from the other ends of the earth. Jesus says that as we wait, what we are waiting for is Jesus to gather his people. Even though the coming of the end of the age, both in this moment with the end of the temple era and the destruction that will come and the fall of Rome in the next few hundred years and the turmoil that this will bring into the Near East, even after all of the world begins to crumble, the sun will darken, stars will fall from the sky. Jesus says, even when all this is taking place, even when the whole earth is actually falling, remember what's happening in this moment is Jesus is gathering those that he has saved for himself. And you need not worry, because his promise is this, that not one of his words will pass away, that every one of his promises will come near. The gospel in this passage is this, that Jesus is gathering his people and he won't let them go. Even though as you process the end of time, even though you think about these things and they naturally make you feel wary and distressed. Just looking at the signs of these things in our world and the wars that we are seeing before our eyes, the difficulty, the confusion, the just general ununderstandability of the world in which we live. In these moments, our job is not to make sure that we understand exactly what is happening, not to make sure that we know exactly when the culmination of the end times will happen, but instead that we would rest in humble faith, knowing that our actions are not supposed to point us to when or how, but to what we are supposed to do, which is why Jesus says this to his disciples in verse 36. Now concerning the day or the hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, except for the Father alone. As the days of Noah were, so the coming of the Son of Man will be. For in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah boarded the ark. They didn't know until the flood came and swept them all away. This is what the coming of the Son of Man will be like. Then 2 men will be in the field, and one will be taken and left. 2 women will be grinding grain with a handmill, and one will be taken and one will be left. Therefore, be alert, since you don't know what day your Lord is coming. But know this, if a homeowner had known what time the thief was coming, he would have stayed alert, and he wouldn't have had his house broken into. This is why you are to be ready. You are also to be ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you don't expect. Jesus calls his disciples and he calls you and I as to live as people who know what is coming. And even though they don't know when it's coming, they live in a way that they believe that their Savior is calling. If you in this moment are resisting belief in Jesus in some way, like maybe perhaps you're even in a moment where you're like, hey, I think I'm coming near to this faith. I think I am starting to see the way the blocks fit together. I'm starting to believe in this Jesus. I'm starting to see who this God is. I'm starting to see how it orders the way that I see the world. I'm starting to see the impossibility of this thing functioning without a hope outside of this mess. And you're waiting, or you're processing. Don't wait. What Jesus says here is the signs of the end will be near, right? He says the signs will be near, they will be clear, but they will be ignored. And then he brings up Noah and the great flood. Remember, this is this man, this patriarch who God called to build the ark, that when he was going to send a flood in order to kill humanity because of the great evil that had arisen in the world, as a place to start over and to give instruction to the world and to show the world the disparity and the difficulty and the pain that they had caused. And this great flood came. Before that flood, Noah was building the boat that God called him to build, that he might save a remnant of humanity and the animals that lived on the earth. in building this, I have to imagine it was cloudy outside, okay? I don't think that the Great Flood was a sun shower that no one saw coming. I think it was well predicted. I think Ellen Baca was like, hey, you got to be careful. It's a level 4 storm. And Troy was just like texting like, I don't buy it at all. 6 inches of snow, never. Because he's always kind of a downer when it comes to the weather. Jesus is saying, like, it's just like the flood. It was forewarned. Noah went around town saying, hey, guys, like, there's room for you here. If you want to save your family, like, come with us. Believe that the Lord is going to do what he said he's going to do. And they laughed at him. So if you're a person who's waiting, who thinks like, well, when I really see the signs, when I really have proof of what is right, that's the point at which I will believe. This is when I will surrender. This is when I'll admit that I don't understand how it all works, and maybe I need something greater than me outside of me. If you are waiting until you can tell that it's the right moment, or you have perfect understanding of the timing and the events, you're going to get caught in the rain. Jesus says the return of Christ will be like the coming of the flood. It will be predicted. There will be signs, but most will miss it. Don't waste your time, believers, trying to figure out when. Instead, pursue a life that lives in the now, knowing that the future is already secure, both in the destruction of all that plagues this world, the brokenness and sin that brings death and corruption into our lives, as well as in the restoration of all of it. That Jesus is coming not to destroy and then leave the world. The world is our forever home. Jesus is coming to restore the earth, that he might bring the new heavens and the new earth and make everything the way it was intended to be. And so what are you called to do, church? You are called to watchfully wait in faith. You are not called to try and predict. What does Jesus say here? He says, not even the angels, not even the Son of Man knows. What is Jesus saying? Jesus is saying, I, as the Son of God, who have taken on flesh, and so am the Son of Man, 100% God and 100% man. In taking on my humanity, I have shielded myself from even he himself knowing the exact date of his own return. So maybe your end times chart book doesn't nail it either, okay? Because Jesus didn't write it, because he's like, I don't know. I can't fill out the last page. I don't know what to do there. Watchfully wait, not trying to predict when these things will happen or if you see them coming perfectly, but living with a mind that is guarded from mistruth and living a life based on the faithfulness of Jesus' teaching that you have been called to. And this is why the passage that we read at the beginning today was actually from the next chapter. And I encourage you this week, go read all of the next chapter of this book. Because what Jesus is going to do is he's just going to give you 3 illustrations. He's going to give you 3 word pictures. He says, hey, how are you guys supposed to behave now? What are the illustrations? What are the indications that Matthew wants you to record to know how to play this out? And he's going to tell a few different stories. He's going to tell the story that Sarah read this morning about coming at the end and how people will be sorted. It'll be as simple as like goats and sheep. He said, I'll know exactly which ones are which. And he says, I'm going to look at them. I'm going to say, hey, come into my kingdom. Like, you cared for me. You fed me. You lived in the way I called you to live. You were the people that I made you to be. Not because of their status or their actions, because of their faithful belief and trust. He'll tell a story of men who were given coins to invest, and some who invested them, and some who just went and buried them in the way that the Maker received them at the end. Not based on whether or not they knew when he was coming, but on how they spent their time and the resources that were given to them. Read through this chapter and see that all of these illustrations are not about how they're supposed to figure it out, and that the most essential thing that they might know is when and how and who. It's all pointed that they would believe Jesus' words, that ultimately the end of this age and this world that we know will come to an end. And so what we are called to do is to live in faithfulness, waiting and believing and hoping for the future that he promises will be without the pain that the end of this one will certainly bring. Would you pray with me that our faith in these matters would carry us through to faithfulness, not trying to predict or understand all things, but humbly trust and believe. Pray with me. God, Father, thank you for this time together. We pray that we would be a people who do not build ourselves up with our knowledge of when things will happen or exactly what they'll look like, who don't claim to be prophets ourselves, but instead claim to follow the greatest prophet of all, the Son of God who came and who said that an end would come and that a return of our Savior was imminent, but we would never know when. Help us, Lord, as we wait. Help us, Lord, as we see pieces of your kingdom grow now even in our midst. And help us, Lord, as we anticipate the beauty and the pain